Chemicals are modern-day wonders that make life easier for all of us. We all use chemicals every day, such as gasoline and oil for your car, fertilizers and pesticides for the lawn and garden. Many of these products can be hazardous if they're not used properly. Chemicals can be used safely if we know exactly what that chemical is and how to use it properly according to the manufacturer's instructions. UPS has a hazard communication program that informs you of the possible chemical hazards that you may find in your workplace. It's based on OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, also known as the Right to Understand. It starts with the manufacturer. The manufacturer is required to provide information for every product it makes. This information is provided in two places, on the product label and on the Safety Data Sheet, or SDS. Each product must have certain information on the label. The label has to be written in English and list the product name as well as its hazardous components. It must also include the manufacturer's name and address, as well as any appropriate hazard warnings for possible physical or health hazards. All products have to be labeled, even secondary containers which you have filled from a larger container such as lubricants or cleaners. If you notice a container with a defaced, torn, or missing label, let your supervisor know as soon as possible. It must be replaced with a new one. Another way to get information about a chemical is by reading the SDS. This is a comprehensive document that covers information about a product. The SDS is categorized in 16 sections. Section 1 lists the product and manufacturer identification. Section 2 lists the product's composition and information on ingredients. Section 3 identifies any hazards associated with the product.
It is important to understand a few common properties of hazardous materials, so we will cover them here. A chemical's pH is important to understand because it indicates if a product is an acid or a base, both of which can cause damage if they come into contact with your skin or eyes. Materials with a pH of less than 7 are considered acids, and those over 7 are considered bases or alkalines. If you were to come into contact with a corrosive in your eyes, it is important to flush them at an eye wash station for at least 15 minutes.
Potentially hazardous substances can come in different forms: solids, liquids, gases, or vapors. Now, gases don't have a definite shape or form, and they expand into the air when released. Some gases are lighter or heavier than others. Helium is a common example of a gas that is lighter than air.
Some gases or vapors are heavier than air and can collect near the ground. This is important to know because these gases or vapors can displace oxygen and cause suffocation, whether they're toxic or not.
Most flammable gases or vapors are heavier than air, and they settle near the ground. Now, if you had a leaking cylinder of flammable gas and there was a spark or flame in the vicinity, it could start a fire or explosion.
That's why it is important to keep any sort of ignition away from flammable liquids or gases, and why you see no smoking signs in areas where they might be stored, such as at the fuel island, near flammable storage cabinets, or where acetylene or propane gas is stored around the facility. It is even important to keep flammables and sources of ignition away from non-flammable gases like oxygen and nitrous oxide because they feed a fire and can make it burn hotter. That's why oxidizers must not be stored near flammable or combustible materials.
Section 4 of the SDS tells you how to take first aid measures if you come into contact with a hazard. Section 5 tells you how to avoid potential fire or explosion hazards. Section 6 covers the proper methods for controlling accidental spills or leaks. Section 7 tells you how to handle and store the product within the facility or building. Section 8 covers the methods to reduce potential exposure to a product. These controls may include engineering controls or personal protective equipment like gloves or goggles. Section 9 lists physical and chemical properties. Section 10 shows the stability and reactability of the product. Section 11 lists any toxicological information. Section 12 lists any ecological information. Section 13 gives you options for safe product disposal. Section 14 lists transportation safety information. Section 15 lists other regulatory information. Section 16 contains other information that might be needed to handle a specific hazard.
The Hazard Communication Program not only covers hazardous products used in the workplace, but hazardous products generated as a byproduct of workplace operations.
One example is carbon monoxide, which is found in many facilities from vehicles or propane-powered forklifts. There is a permanently filed SDS in the Hazard Communication Binder that covers carbon monoxide. UPS takes extra precautions to minimize exhaust in its facilities. The ventilation and exhaust fans are set to come on 15 minutes prior to the driver's start times. The overhead doors are raised for ventilation. Drivers perform preliminary vehicle checks in the building without running the engine, called cold pre-trips. Drivers have staggered start times to eliminate idling in the building. UPS uses an outside vendor to manage the facility chemical inventory lists and corresponding information for each product's SDS. The vendor information is accessed via the web. If you use chemicals at UPS as part of your job, your supervisor will provide the necessary information and additional training required for accessing this information.
The inventory list of chemicals is cataloged by product name and manufacturer. It can be sorted, downloaded, and printed from the website alphabetically by product or manufacturer. The information on the inventory list includes the following: product name, the hazardous components, manufacturer name and address, appropriate hazard warnings for possible physical or health hazards such as irritants, flammables, or corrosives.
If you need an SDS for a product that is not stored or used at a UPS facility, there are several options for obtaining one. You can call the manufacturer or look it up on the manufacturer's website, or you can also call the UPS SDS vendor at 1-800-711-5918 to see if they have a copy in their database. If so, one will be faxed to you. This module covered the Hazard Communication Program at UPS, which provides important information about chemicals in the workplace and is based on OSHA's Right to Understand standard. Two important places to get information on chemicals are the product label and the SDS. Remember, all products have to be labeled, even secondary containers. You can obtain SDS for chemicals used at UPS facilities by accessing the HazCom vendor website. If you need an SDS for a chemical not used at UPS, notify your supervisor. There are several methods for obtaining one: calling the manufacturer or shipper, looking it up on the manufacturer website, or calling the UPS HazCom vendor to see if a copy is available in its database.